I'm going to go back. I'm going to retell quickly a story that I told maybe a month ago. And this is a story about the people of Chelm. The people of Chelm, who were Jews. They looked like Jews, just like any other Jews, but there was something off about them. So I'll give you this story so that we can pick up where we left off. The people of Chelm, once a year, would mount up their wagons, put all of the grain that they had harvested into the wagons, and they would ride days and days to the town of Shetlitz. They would make their way to Shetlitz, and they would spend days there using the water mill that Shetlitz had to grind their grain so that they could come back days later, exhausted, but have enough flour, enough grain to last through the winter to make bread and even matzah. Now, Gimel was a Chelmite of particular intelligence. And one time when they were all traveling back from Shetlitz with their piles of grain, Gimel thought to himself, what a waste. What a waste of my time. What a waste of our energy. Not only that, what a waste of our money. We're paying these millers in Shetlitz 20% to grind our grain. We're Chelm. Why not build our own mill? So the Chelmites that were with Gimel nodded to themselves, yes, of course, we should build a water mill in Chelm. They come back and announce their plans to the town, and they get right to work. All of Chelm's architects, all of the greatest minds in Chelm got together, and using their wisdom, they built a pretty beautiful water mill. It was structurally sound. It had doors. All the doors had knobs. All the knobs had locks below them. It was a good mill. It was red with a beautiful tin roof. But you see, the Chelmites were a proud people. And when they set about to build their mill, they thought, why not build it on top of the mountain, so that all those around, all of those fools in Shetlitz, all those people that travel, they'll see our beautiful water mill and they'll know how great Chelm is. So they built on the top of the mountain. And the day came that the water mill had been finished and all the town gathered around. There was Model, the mayor, and of course Gimel, the greatest mind in Chelm. And because it had been Gimel's idea, he had the honor of pulling the crank that would start the mill grinding the grain. The whole town gathered together and he pulled the lever and nothing happened. They said, oh man, something must not have been right in the construction. So again they look and they check in their doors and they have the two millstones. The doors have locks and knobs. But they realize something. There are no windows into the mill. Now Shlomi, the scientist, says, this could of course explain things. When it's very dark, the forces of evil gather. Goblins come out. It's so dark in the mill that the goblins have been allowed to come out and they're messing with our mill. We have to bring the light of day into the mill. So the town takes this idea up, and the adults haul barrels of sunlight that they gather outside, and they bring it into the mill, and the children bring little buckets of sunlight into the mill. And after everyone has done this for a whole day, the mill's still dark. So Shlomi says, well, take the roof off. So they take the roof off the mill. Still, they pull the crank, nothing. To this time, that a wandering man passes by, sees this spectacle, and says, "You fools, you can't put a watermill on top of a mountain. You need to put it by a river. The river turns the wheel. That's what causes the mill to work." All the Chelmites laughed at this fool, who obviously knew nothing about watermills. But an idea did come by. The name of the thing, a watermill, it must have water. So Gimple comes up with the idea that they're going to form a line from the river all the way up the mountain to the mill. And one by one they pass buckets up and down and up and down. And they pour these buckets of water on top of this giant wheel, and still nothing happens. Realizing that the mill will not work, Gimple, of course, announces, "We did everything that we could to build it right. We tried to let as much light in as possible to scare away the goblins. We poured water on the wheel. You know what? It must be that the climate in Chelm is just not suited to a watermill." But the Chelmites now had a problem. They had all of this grain that needed to be ground before the winter came. If they did not grind it, they would have no food. They would have no produce to sell. And they began to panic. And it was at that same time that a rich Jewish miller from a few towns away wandered into Chelm. Seeing this watermill on the mountain, he says to the Chelmites, "You realize you have to build a watermill by the river." They said, yes, we've heard this nonsense before. We've heard it before. And he says, "Okay, if you're talking to a child," the miller thinks to himself, "you're talking to a child, you have to speak like a child. So maybe when I'm in Chelm and I'm talking to Chelmites, I have to think like a Chelmite." So the miller proposes a plan. It may not be the right climate in Chelm for a watermill. But look, you have these beautiful mountains. Perfect place for a windmill. How about you sell me your watermill, and I'll build you a new windmill on top of the mountain. The Chelmites are not too keen on this, but they get together, as they often do, and they debate for 7 days and 7 nights until their foreheads are wrinkled as prunes. And they say, no, this won't do. People from far and wide see our watermill, and they know how great Chelm is. We can't possibly sell you our watermill. But, there's quite a bit of room up on top of that mountain. What if we just moved the watermill so that you could build your windmill, and everyone will be happy? The miller rolls his eyes. He knows what's going to happen. But he decides to stick around because he could use a laugh. So all of the men and women of Chelm go up the mountain in an attempt to move their watermill. They take off their jackets and they pile their jackets behind them. They roll up their sleeves, spit into their palms, and begin to push with every ounce of their strength on this watermill. They push for minutes that turn into hours. The sun begins to set. And all while they're pushing, a thief comes along, sees their pile of coats, figures they must be lonely, and takes all the coats with him. Night has now fallen, and the Chelmites decide that now it's time to turn around to see how much progress they've made. They turn around and Gimple exclaims, "Chelmites, look at what we've done. We've pushed so hard. We can't even see our coats anymore. We've pushed it so far." It was at that point that the miller came up to the town and said, "You guys realize that someone just stole your coats while you were pushing?" And Gimple, the wisest mind in all of hell, shakes his finger and says, "Don't be silly. What could a person do with more than one coat?" So that is the story of the watermill in Chelm. But now the Chelmites are starving. They have no food for the winter. And as a last-ditch effort, the mayor decides, we have these two beautiful millstones made of the finest stone in our mill that doesn't work. Let's sell these stones, make a little money from them, so that we can have a little bit to last us through the winter. The people all agree, but they realize, how are we going to get these giant millstones and carry them from the top of the mountain all the way into Shedlitz or wherever we need to go to sell them? Gimple, the wisest man in Chelm, has an idea. He says, it's simple. The mill wheels are circular. We'll roll them down the hill, and we'll put it in a wagon and take it to Shedlitz. So the Chelmites go up to the top. They unhook, they undo all the screws and boards and whatnot. They lift up the millstone, they roll it down the hill, it lands in the river, glug, 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 sinks to the bottom. The Chelmites stand there for an hour, stand there for 2 hours. They finally realize that the stone is not going to come back up. Gimple has another idea. This time, we need to know where the stone lands in the water so that we can go and find it. Beryl the beetle, who's kind of the town's, well, let's just say he's not imbued with a Chelmite eye. We're going to have him stick his head in the middle of the millstone. We'll roll him down the hill, down the mountain, and when it lands in the river, we'll wait, and he'll take his head out from the millstone, swim up to the top, and tell us exactly where the millstone is. So, after much hemming and hawing, Beryl the beetle agrees to this plan. He sticks his head into the middle of the millstone. The Chelmites all give a big push, and he rolls down the hill. The Chelmites go down to the riverbank. They wait for an hour. They wait for 2 hours. Hours turns into days. And yet, Beryl the beetle did not come up from the water. And so, Gimple and the mayor got together and they decided that the only course of action, the only way they were going to get their money back for those millstones, was to send a messenger to all the surrounding towns, saying that if you see a man walking around with a giant millstone around his neck, please arrest him immediately and have him returned to hell for trial for theft. Now, Beryl the beetle luckily survived this incident, but that's a story for another time.